So on Thursday, Jagex released the combat beta update to the game. There's a hell of a lot of changes coming for combat in RuneScape, and so in this video I wanted to talk about a few of them. I'm going to talk about the things that I love about it, some of the things that I maybe don't really love and maybe would suggest a few changes on, and then we'll move on after that and talk about magic specifically, as that's the only combat style other than necromancy that I currently have access to test, but also it's the only style that I'm really efficient enough in to really give my thoughts on properly anyway. So let's go. Starting off with some of the great things coming to the combat beta. First of all, there is a channeled ability bar, which is going to indicate to you how long you have left on a channeled ability once you use it. It'll also tell you if you cancel that ability, what ability you're using. Now, I like this a lot because it's something that helps newer players to get into PvM and get more visual feedback on what's actually happening in the game. Too often, I would see that players were cancelling their channeled abilities too soon, like Asphyxiate or Smoke Tendrils or anything like that. As long as it was a channeled ability, they seemed to cancel it and not realize what they were doing. Whereas now you'll actually have some visual feedback to say that ability was cancelled and that it is actually a channeled ability too. Another thing I love is the input feedback that you get from the action bar whenever you press a keybind. Whenever you now press a keybind from your action bar, you will actually see it light up with a box around it and indicate that you have pressed that key. This can be useful for a few different things. One, it can be useful for anyone watching any sort of content online, like if you're watching a YouTuber or a streamer, you're going to be able to see what keys they're pressing in what situation. It could be useful for learning if you're watching them do a boss that you want to do and you want to see exactly what they're actually pressing. However, the main reason I like this is because it's going to give newer players that get into PvM, again, a bit of extra visual feedback to this too. It means that you know if you've pressed an ability or not, and for example, if an ability doesn't go off but you saw the indicator, you know that it was probably a timing issue and not that you didn't press it or anything like that. So you kind of get feedback on what you need to work on or whether it was even actually input into the game or not. Now, don't get me wrong, this change isn't going to be completely game breaking for newer players learning combat. Combat is still going to be confusing, but it is definitely going to add to helping out a little bit. As an example of this though, I was trying to pick up magic again to test out through this whole beta, and I spent quite a few hours doing so. But along the way, of course, it's been a while since we actually used magic because of necromancy. I had to shake off a bit of rust. I was trying to do the whole detonate with an ability and an auto attack in a full combo, and I was every now and again not managing to get it to actually fire through properly. Now, to me, without this indicator, I probably would have just thought, something didn't go right. What was it? Was it the game? Was it like lag? Did I mistime it? Did I not press the key? I don't know. Because I have the indicator now, I could tell that I was actually just mispressing stuff, and so I could fix that pretty quickly. Another great thing, of course, is the actual tooltips of abilities now. They will show you all the information that necromancy will, and it works very much the same way in showing you the amount of damage you'll actually deal when you use that. So this is just a lot easier to understand and is definitely something that we needed. However, one thing that I don't necessarily like better now is the actual keybind labels. The current keybind labels that are in the beta, the new ones, seem a little bit small to me, but also having Alt and then the keybind changed from the original version. As you can see on screen, you'll see the old one and then the new one. I like the old one better, if I'm being completely honest. The fact that it's like A and then a number or a letter now, and or S and then a number and a letter, seems a little bit more confusing to me than just having it written as it was before. Not to mention how small these actually are now. Even just the regular keybinds, the text is super small and a bit more difficult to read. But I do think that the action bar looks more cluttered or confusing and like what the frick is going on when you see A, C, A1, S1, C, there's too many letters all over the place and you're like, wait, what the frick is this? So personally, I still prefer the old way of doing this, and I don't think it really needed changing. The next thing to talk about, of course, is the increase in DPS rates for all three of the combat styles. The hit cap has been increased for all combat styles now to 30,000, and you're definitely going to notice this in many places. You're going to notice this more for melee though, as obviously you hit over that 12k that we used to have very often, so this is a big deal. Whereas for example, magic on the other hand, it didn't really benefit from the hit cap increase all that much in comparison. Like it still benefits from it, you're still going to hit over that, you're still going to see 13ks, maybe 14ks sometimes as well, but nowhere near as often. Overall though, DPS has increased slightly for the other combat styles, but as far as I can tell, necromancy will still be king in terms of DPS, at least for now anyway. Well, except for Dominion Mines. Dominion Mines are the most overpowered thing in the game right now, as both of them will hit 30k each. 30k from Dominion Mines. This is crazy. I'm not sure if this will stay in the game as it is or be removed, but those things are doing a lot of damage. So basically, I love the interface changes that give more feedback to players, and of course the DPS increase is nice to not feel like you're so far behind necromancy and forced to stay on it. I don't really like the actual changes to the keybinds and stuff like that. Hopefully that gets reverted or changed or adjusted in some way. Maybe it's just me being fussy, but the people I've asked as well have said similar things. However, combat itself just feels a little bit more smooth as well, with the changes to Surge, the changes to Anticipate as well, and then the cleaning up of the hit splats. Combat just feels a lot more smooth and less clunky and just, I don't know, there's definitely a noticeable difference in the enjoyment or just the quality of combat overall, at least in my opinion. Not having your action bar flash you in random little sequences all over the place helps too, but also being able to fire off Anticipate, for those of you that don't know, no longer has a cooldown. It's off global cooldown now, and will not consume a global cooldown either. You can use this whenever you want, which is nice to have too. And also Surge works the same way in the sense that you can just use it whenever you want and it will not consume a global cooldown. And I like this a lot. I think this is definitely an improvement, and it makes everything feel way more fluid and just smooth to play. The experience just feels better. So overall, so far, things are looking pretty good in terms of improvements to the actual core mechanics of combat for RuneScape. Right, now, this is the part where we're going to talk specifically about magic and my experience using that, which honestly was pretty interesting. All right then, so what's my experience like from using magic? Well, as many of you probably know, magic got probably the least amount of changes and updates to its actual combat style, so there's not a whole lot of things to talk about in terms of what actually changed. But the things that did change is Magma Tempest got buffed slightly with a little bit more damage. This way you don't have to focus specifically on weaving that auto attack in there. You no longer do this, you just get a bit of extra damage. There was a few special attack changes, none of them really worth talking about if I'm being completely honest, unless I've missed something. I looked into them and there's some cool things. For example, there's the Penance Trident, which could be interesting. I'll have to unlock it, but it's going to do more damage than a Gothic Staff does, but it costs 10% more adrenaline, but it will also, half of that will be refunded if it kills a target. Now this might be useful in certain situations, and with a passive Ring of Vigor and whatnot, it may be worth using for that extra bit of damage, which is something that we'll have to look into. But otherwise, the Mind Spike is probably not a big deal for high level players as the damage isn't that high, but it does add a nice little weapon spec for anybody leveling up at a low level and stuff like that, so it's definitely cool that they've done this. Zuriel Staff, maybe you would use this for AoE, but it doesn't slow the attack speed of bosses. So the way Zuriel Staff spec works is it will do AoE damage in a 3x3 area, but then it will also slow the attack speed of the target by like a tick rate, right? So this doesn't apply to bosses, unfortunately. I did test it out, but the AoE nuke may be useful in some places, but for mostly PVM, like boss situations, this is probably not going to be something you would use as it costs 50% adrenaline. The Obliteration is just for PvP, at least as far as I can tell, as the special attack, what it does is it will half the target's healing that it does get. Like, this could be useful in future bosses if it actually applies to bosses, that is, if they have any sort of healing effects that we have to deal with. Maybe this will become useful at that point, but as of right now, this is pretty much just a PvP thing. The Staff of Darkness, again, not really worth it because it costs 100% adrenaline, and while it did do some changes with it, 100% adrenaline to like reflect some damage back is a little bit crazy. It could be useful for like escaping people in the wilderness, but you guys can turn PvP off now, so it's pretty much not really worth. So the special attacks aren't that big of a deal as of right now, but we'll have to see what happens. Maybe I missed something along those. Now the Wreck and Ruin thing confused me a little bit at first, if I'm being honest. The way this works, I believe, is now if you use Greater Chain and then you use Combust after using Wreck and Ruin, you will also get those extra hits on the extra targets, meaning if you have roaming, you can get up to 15 extra hits, but they're spread out with a limit of 2 extra per target. So you can still only get 7. It doesn't like increase it to 15 combust hits on one target unless I was doing it completely wrong, but it does allow you to apply up to 15 more stacks to everything in an area, which is an increase to AoE damage. Like it's a big increase to AoE damage. So for Slayer and for running dungeons, you'll probably notice this. So other than the actual damage increase itself and the crit damage increase and whatnot, this is the changes you can expect from magic. However, How does it actually perform now in certain places? Well, of course, I went around a few of my most regular places that I will do bossing and checked out the experience. I went to ED1, clearing the dungeon felt super nice. The Magma Tempest is a super helpful thing to have buffed. Clearing out some trash mobs in there is really nice and easy now. And then of course, having the increase in damage and having things hit over the actual hit cap helps you clear some mobs that you wouldn't have cleared in the past. So having like greater chain and omni power and whatnot, you do output a lot of damage and clear things pretty quickly. As for the bosses, I really didn't notice any difference whatsoever, if I'm being completely honest. Like there was no difference what I'm used to here at all, whether it's because of the Staff of Armadyl nerf a little while back or not, and it kind of feels like you're on the same level as that, but overall the experience here wasn't a big deal. Now, I did manage to one-cycle Seiryu still, and this is something that I only just learned to do before Necromancy came out, but I wanted to try it in a way that was like more casual, not as in-depth and thought out. I just wanted to go up, do DPS, and hopefully it would be okay, right? So I did this and I did manage to pull it off, but the biggest reason of this was because the Dominion mines were hitting 30k each. Like 60k damage from Dominion mines was an insane amount of carry, and without it you would still have to do the actual in-depth rotation, prepare yourself and output as much damage as you can and really think about what you're doing to get through this, and it probably still isn't actually consistent because of course you're relying on crits from these Staff of Armadyl. So basically Seiryu as well also felt pretty similar to how it used to be. Next up I went to Raksha, and at Raksha I wanted to try and do a pool skip because of course with Necromancy now, if you're not pool skipping then you want to try because it's a lot easier, and it's so much easier than doing the freaking pools anyway, so it's not that difficult to do with tier 90 gear in Necromancy, and with a bit of practice you'll definitely get it. With Magic though, this was hard, man. This was really difficult. Now I didn't want to do the things of setting up with a dummy, using like Natural Instinct and preparing yourself all this like perfect amount. I just wanted to go in, save my Fractured Staff of Armadyl spec for the pool skip, and then as I got close, set up and throw out as much damage as possible. I tried this many times and you're gonna see me failing this on screen over and over and over again. Sometimes I would actually get through and phase, but he would have done the heal, and so I was like one ability, two abilities off before I actually phased through. So you could definitely do this, but I eventually did manage to actually do it, but I had to use Natural Instinct before I could pull it off. I needed that extra adrenaline to push myself through. So pool skipping Raksha with Magic is definitely going to be easier now, and something that you could probably consistently pull off with a little bit of practice and not screwing it up like I did many times, but it's nowhere near as like close and consistent as Necromancy will be. And then finally I took this to Kerapak in hard mode, and again I didn't really notice any difference from the current state of the game. Yes, I was hitting harder and the kills were slightly faster. Doing the magic wall skips was a lot easier because of that increased DPS, but you definitely still had to try to actually get through this. So Kerapak hard mode pretty much felt the same. So overall I would say Magic feels pretty similar to the current game, but again, combat feels more smooth, it feels a lot nicer, and having these changes where the hit cap's increased and your crit rates, like crit damage is increased as well, these are all important things to keep in mind and to sort of think about what could possibly come in the future. Right now, I feel like Magic does need a bit of attention in terms of an upgrade, maybe to a set effect for Elite Tectonic, maybe to the tier 95 dual wield weapons to see what that does and that actually adds to the combat style as well. But for Magic to compete with the others, then you will definitely be looking for some future updates to bring it back to life a little bit. So overall, I do think the combat beta is looking pretty good. I like the interface changes and the things that like give more visual feedback. It's absolutely great. The only thing that I would like is maybe a button to just toggle the difference between the old keybind labels and the new ones, because it's going to be a preference. I don't like it as it is on the new one. I like the older ones better, but other people are probably going to prefer it in different ways. So if it's toggleable, then that's just the best of both worlds. Have you guys tried out the combat beta? If you have, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you give your feedback to Jagex as well. But otherwise, catch you on the next one. So later, guys.